Here's another piece of movie news. Wolf of Wall Street, which is Scorsese's latest film that comes out in December or November, I think. Rumor has it that movie is pretty close to an NC-17.
Wow. Huh.
So
I guess they, have them cavorting with prostitutes and covered in cocaine half the time.
I can't imagine it being violent, but the sex, I'm sure there's an abundance of maybe sex in it. But he has a special thing that he does where he thinks he's going to get a harsh rating, so he shoots much harsher stuff that he includes in the first cut.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And then he trims it back to the way he wanted it all along.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
He did that with Casino, but that was violence.
Yeah. This is obviously going to be a heavily and probably drug use. I bet that's a big deal in it.
Is sex, though, is that still the most taboo of, between sex, violence, and drugs? Sex is the one that's least likely to get by the censors, right, out of all those three?
Yeah. They just don't like, that ratings board just doesn't like being in that room with all these other stodgy people, sitting there watching these sexy movies and maybe getting a hard-on or whatever. They hate that. That makes them very uncomfortable. They don't like it. Yeah,
apparently
true.
you used to be able to sit in there with them and have conversations with them. And then it became a completely anonymous committee. Friedkin talks about this in his book. He said that I used to be able to go in there with stuff like The Exorcist, and they used to communicate with me. And then when it came time to Killer Joe or something like that, you have no idea who's watching your movie. They're protected by the sheet of mystery.
It probably got to be too time-consuming for them to actually have discussions because then every movie that was, back when Exorcist was coming out, that was sort of breaking new ground. But 8 years later or whatever, every movie has somebody's head getting chopped off in it, and you can't have the director of every one of those head chopping movies coming in there saying, well, they chop his head off because it's actually in the process of doing something good or whatever, and then. Then they can't get through as many movies because they're having all these discussions. So they probably had to cut it down just from the interest of time.
But that's the irony. I mean, people don't care. They don't seem to care if you chop a head off or you burn someone alive in Savages. And they actually chop heads off. They chop heads off in that movie, too. What they care about is Gina Gershon being full frontal in the opening scene of Killer Joe.
Right.
That's what they're concerned with.
What's really funny to me? I used to do this live television show with my co-host, who I won't name right here, but he was very stodgy and had these kind of like semi. He was a libertarian, but he had conservative views. Anyway, he used to always give negative reviews to movies that were sexy. And movies that were violent, he could take. And then I asked him one time. I said, "Why is it that you don't like the sexy movies and you like the violent ones?" And he said, "Because I know that the violence is fake, but with the sex, I don't know that the sex is fake, and that makes me uncomfortable." So that's the deal. That's the deal. I know that nobody is getting actually killed or murdered in this thing, but with the sex thing, I have a suspicion that someone might be getting a little moist or getting a little hard while doing this scene. So that makes me
okay. Moist or hard? Wow. I'm gonna use that. I'm gonna pull that sound clip, and I'm gonna use it for like a baking show that I do. About cooking brownies, baking brownies. I'm going to repurpose your quote, man.
But yeah, anyway. It's interesting.